Hey, hello, welcome back, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us once more. If you're brand new, welcome. We're brought to you this week by our sponsors, Go Deep Flotation. I'm going to get into that in a moment, but again, I just want to say a massive thank you for the gratitude that we have for everybody. We've had nothing but lovely comments. Only 2 episodes have gone out, but it's just been mad. Receiving lovely comments and people sharing things, and the community's growing off of the bat. Like I said, mentioned before, there's a little community growing in America. We got messaged, people spoke to us from Australia saying how much they loved it and they've shared it, and everybody asking about floating. So Go Deep Flotation are our sponsors. We're sending people to them with a code CHEW. You can get 10% off a float. I explained what it was in the intro last time. If you didn't get that, I'll give you a quick overview now. It's 10 inches or 11 inches of water filled with Epsom salts. It's heated to skin temperature, as is the air with inside the pod. The pod is just like a big, beautiful bath with a lid on. You've got lovely LED lighting in there, and they play some lovely audio. It might be jungle sounds or whale song or something like that, something lovely for 10 minutes when you get in. And just about as the audio cuts off, you lose the sensation of where you end and the water begins, and it really kicks in the silence and the darkness and you. And there's all sorts of amazing, beautiful things happening with the float itself. Physically, the alleviation of gravity, inflammation, wear and tear on the joints, the bones. It's an amazing thing for the body physically, but also mentally, psychologically, you're just literally having a spring clean. I mean, I think if you did listen to the Matt episodes, he talks about early in episode 1, the overwhelming thought processes. We do all sweep a lot under the rug. There's a lot going on. Life is busy. It's digital. We're wired in. You've got WhatsApp, Messenger, texts, group texts, that thing, this thing, everything's just 100 mile an hour. And getting in that tank it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's not, it takes 2 or 3 floats to actually sort of let yourself let go, because we are so deeply connected to everything. To just lay in the dark in that wonderful, beautiful, soft environment feels weird. It feels abstract. And I guess it sounds abstract, but really it's really simple, isn't it? You're just in a comfortable environment on your own, left with your thoughts, and it's a wonderful thing to do. And the guys have mentioned to us that they've had an influx of people floating and people booking floats, so it's been amazing. So Go Deep Flotation, they are wonderful people. They look after everybody. Get yourselves over there, get floating, use the code CHEW, 10% off. You get in there for 60 minutes, cut off from the world, cut off from this bloody phone that's amazing and also terrible, and just chill out and enjoy yourself for an hour, and take those rewards back into your life. GoDeepFlotation.com, check them out. Okay, massive thank you for all the support we've had. It's just been overwhelming. It's been mad. Just lovely messages. 2 episodes have gone down great. We went down to see the Pod Bible issue 7 launch in London at the King's Place. I'm going to talk to you more about that at the end, but that was lovely. We touched base with some lovely podcasters and people from the podcast community, and the guys that have put the magazine together themselves, as well as Mr. Scroobius Pip, who is running the Distraction Pieces Network, which is really helped the British UK podcast scene push on. So that was really nice. So I'll get to that in the outro. In the meantime, we're going to get on with episode 3. This is Miss Amanda Wanowski. We covered a lot of ground here. Amanda is a super interesting, super educated lady. Really lived a life of determination to prove the point. She's from London. Her parents... Dad was from the UK, her mum was from Trinidad. She ended up in foster care in her sort of early mid-teens. Watched a Rocky montage, and then that was it. That kind of set her off from the rough estate she was living in on a mission to run, and she found some kind of solace, some kind of peace from running, and that led to being picked up and becoming a professional athlete, and then that led to all sorts of physical endeavours that she followed, with canoeing and rowing and all sorts of things, with a dream to get to the Olympics. And as the story unravels, she ended up on the front line in Afghanistan as a medic in the theatre, and a story it bends and weaves all around the place. And she's now a hypnotherapist, and as you'll find out during this conversation, she uses all of this experience and all of these life lessons now to help other people with her project, the Breakthrough Project. She's a super exciting lady with lots and lots to offer. It certainly helped me chatting with her, so let's crack it on. Let's do it. Without further ado, episode number 3 of Chew the Chat podcast with Miss Amanda Wanowski.
Welcome to Chew the Chat podcast.
I'm dipping my toe into veganery, like January, going all in. And
have you done it before?
I have, and I'd like to say I have, but it wasn't intentional. It was like things like different protein sources were just being cut out, and it came about because I was so poor as a student, so I just ended up eating vegetables and rice and pasta while I was training for rowing, and I was just like, I can't afford chicken, mince too expensive, I've never really been into eggs, and then I'm not great with dairy, so it was just like these things sort of fell out of my diet, so it was unintentional, but I would have just said I'm more but then every now and again I'd have a bit of fish, I
wish I ate more fish. I wish I ate more fish.
It's I don't miss it. It's just so we just were like, we watched the Game Changers, and I was and I did notice over the years, I was like,
What did you make of the Game Changers? Because that's been quite polarising.
Yeah, it is and it isn't. I think it's made really well, but they show you evidence, but they don't explain the evidence. So
I listened to a 3-hour podcast between the chap that made it and Chris Kresser.
He's from Melton, isn't he?
I think so, yeah. Chris Kresser did a podcast and sort of critiqued the film. And Chris Kresser was, I think, 20 years a vegan, and then ended up changing back to sort of being sort of varied diet. Big proponent of plants and vegetables still to this day, but believes that, some meat produce that's grass-fed and sort of as healthily reared as possible is a good part of your diet.
Yeah.
And it ended up being this 3-hour podcast about the Game Changer guy sort of critiquing his debunking of it, and it then didn't become about the film as such as it became about, you got this wrong because you'd said it was 3.5 teaspoons of peanut butter to a slice of hot, and it got very kind of personal.
I just don't think that's necessarily. A friend of mine, I was talking to Kieran McVitie. She's an excellent advocate for women's cycling, and she's got this huge YouTube, and we've known each other for years, and we were both discussing this, and she was saying to me, I've seen it too, and when they showed, there's this piece where there's these American footballers that have had a meat-based meal, and then they take a blood sample and they put it through the spinner to look at the blood plasma, and then they have a vegetarian burrito and they show the plasma again, and she said you could see that one was had a thicker viscosity with fat and one didn't. What they didn't say and what they didn't show was which one's better for performance. They just assumed that people were making the link between the narrowing of the arteries, as in, and the oxygen uptake, and the blood, things changing within that person against those things. But it was an assumption. It's not proof. And that's what she was saying was going a lot in that documentary. And I happen to agree with that. It was like, look, these are you can have evidence going either way. It's just really, for me, that it was just it's an interesting program. It is really polarizing. But the piece that did move me more was about the our ecosystem, our
the
planet,
ecology of what we're doing,
and the impact. And if I can reduce in my household that, and that is something that happens lifelong, I would feel like I am making a step in the right direction for protecting our planet, which is ultimately my only everlasting home. It's going to be my children's home. I have to become more aware about these things. It's not just about taking care of me. And certainly what I've learned through everything that I do in my world and in Breakthrough is that when you're empowering individuals to start taking care of their home, their minds, their bodies, and the thoughts that go on in them, they've got more room for the wider problems that we are facing as humanity.
Well, I tell you what, Amanda, we're on, and I'm going to introduce you, Amanda Wanowski.
You got it. Yeah.
Yes, Amanda Wanowski, and you just mentioned Breakthrough there.
Yeah.
You are founder Breakthrough Project, which is essentially your therapy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
you're a hypnotherapist.
That's right. Yeah,
and you are doing your damnedest, as you just mentioned there, to help put things on some kind of
even
understandable.
It's been such a massive journey into what Breakthrough has become, and it's growing. And I have a huge journey myself with my own PTSD, with trauma in the family, and kind of how I tried to transmute that. So how my life has become a machine for generating change. So basically what I was telling myself, and I've always told myself, is it can't have all just been for nothing. So Breakthrough kind of emerged after I got into subconscious hypnotherapy by accident. And what was actually happening was I had been a manual therapist for a long time, and I've always gone to the edges of our understanding, and I've always looked for the wacky out there courses, because what I was finding was when people were on their back and you were treating them, they would get up off the table and they would walk their problems straight back into their body before they'd walked out of the door. And so I started to immediately think, the answer is not to be laid flat. The answer is to treat in the position that the person is in difficulty, which is on their feet mostly. And so I started to study like the whole body gait analysis, movement and structures, and that led me towards... And then what happened was I did that, and that really fired up the way I was working with people's bodies. I was things were changing for people really, really fast. I wasn't massaging anymore at all. I wasn't doing deep tissue. I was doing much more like mobilization. So the bones were talking to the muscles, essentially. So chiropractors would kind of agree with this. Other groups may not think so. I think that that's a really narrow view, full stop. I think the whole body speaks to the whole body on a completely holographic level, and you can't ignore one system. You have to understand that they are all communicating. And so I went from there to I'd been chasing an injury in myself, which was a long-standing Achilles problem that had plagued me when I'd been out in Afghanistan. It had reduced my ability to be the runner, and that was the way that I used exercise to manage my mental state post-tour. And it was an outlet, so being really physical was this huge outlet for everything that I was containing. And then I got this problem, and I couldn't do that anymore. And so I was trying to understand how to get rid of this pain in my leg, which was consistent. It was for like 8 years. And I was on this course where I'd started to study the central nervous system. And so I'd gone further away from movement and was more into how information enters our bodies and what that means for us and how the body reacts to it. And that's called PDTR. Proprioceptive deep tendon therapy, and I did that, and I studied the central nervous system and applied kinesiology for 2 years with a doctor. And then what came about on that course, I'm sitting there and this doctor just says 90% of all of people's maintained problems are emotional. I was like, yeah, can I swear?
You can do what the fuck you want.
You're fucking joking. So I'm doing all this manual therapy, and then this guy who's teaching this course, it costs a fucking bomb, drops one. He's like, it's emotion, like emotions are top. And I'm just sat there like, how do you even begin to deal with that? And a lot of the other guys were starting to do like these sort of eye-based therapies, and one of them was CRT, which is cellular release therapy. And at this time, I was going into London doing this course, and I couldn't recognise in myself like the level of anxiety, fear. My brain was putting out things like stress-induced vertigo to get me out of London. So once I started to not be able to maintain my balance, I had to return home. And I didn't know that. So in somewhere far, far, far away, someone might drop a book and I would jump in my chair, and that would evoke this huge adrenal response. Now, bear in mind, I was someone that was out on the ground in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. My whole system was lit from coming home. And although I was maintaining in normal life, my state was high always. And so the part of my brain that would be observing the world for threat was really heightened.
Tuned, yeah.
And so that was all going on, and it was invisible to me. And then, except there was this noticeable thing around my children, and what it was on a daily basis, I was not remembering what happened the day before. And a fear started to come inside of that, because my brain, so what happens to people is if they're really super anxious, they're functioning in their long-term memory, and their short-term memory isn't as effective because they're working from their experiences to work out what is coming at them. And that in essence means that the lists of things that go on a daily basis that aren't routine won't be
registered.
Yes. And so they're kind of in this sort of survival state. And that's where I was at. I didn't know that because I'd been there for nearly half a decade. And so I've got this going on, and I have this awareness that I'm only feeling extremes of emotion. I'm only present when it's like a birthday or when something absolutely diabolical has happened. Everything in between, numb. And so I knew this about myself, but it hadn't registered to me that I could possibly have PTSD. Yeah, I was somebody that was out on the ground. I was in the operational theatres. I had masses of high exposure.
And that's in Afghanistan on tour.
So I had all of that. And previous to that, I was a child that had experienced a family suicide, but in my 20s. So I've got all this stuff backed up.
Well, I would like to just jump in and sort of take it back a little bit.
Sorry, Sam.
No, listen, this is why we're here. We are chewing chat. This is amazing. But I do like to give listeners a little bit of insight from the background. So if you can kind of snapshot it through.
Okay, so...
Because you mentioned there in your childhood and,
my childhood was like, it's going to sound awful, but it wasn't. So... My family, my mum was particularly very, very nomadic. And so we did in the region of like 30 moves through my childhood.
And this is in the UK, yeah?
Yeah.
You're in the UK.
And there was a bit of time out in the Caribbean and then back. And so that's good, but not good. I mean, I cultivated a ton of skill sets that wouldn't normally so being able to get into a group really quickly and establish friendships that are good and lasting quickly, being able to not be too freaked out about change. Those things are things that there's a level of resilience that comes with that type of change.
And are you, at this point, so when you're moving around, are mum and dad together at this point?
My parents were separated officially they separated when I was about 5. I kind of saw my dad on and off through my life. But he wasn't a major player in my life, but emotionally as a child, I was like, he's God.
Of course, yeah.
So, like, it's that was the thing. And so we're moving around. I'm a state kid. I'm growing up in West London, spending time on some of the more unsavoury estates, and one of the roughest ones in West London, which was White City. And so life was quite chaotic. So there was things going on for me there. And then So my mum had mental health problems my entire childhood.
And is it your mum, Trinidad is your history? Is that your mum? Mum's from Trinidad?
Yeah.
Okay, and your dad, you British?
Yeah, so my mum was actually part of that Windrush generation. So my mum came over to support the UK nursing, the request that they came, and she came and she wasn't a state registered nurse, but she nursed in the UK, and that's what she did. And so all of that was going on, and she wasn't particularly healthy, and life was stable, unstable until I was in my teens. And kind of what sort of happened then, there was this kind of huge crossroads, and I was watching my mum regress, and I was starting to just spend more and more time with my friends. And we'd moved, and we were now on White City, and I wasn't doing particularly well at school. I was a total dropout. And I wasn't thriving at school, but somewhere along the line I watched Rocky, and I watched him train. And
powerful training, not homage.
I know, like mega montage,
yes.
Like and I was like, I wonder if I can get strong. And I started to run, and I was running, and I was just running around the block. I was so poor. Like I had this one pair of shorts, this terrible plastic jacket.
You were Rocky.
And I'd go running around the estate. You never went through the estate, you went around it. And I just trained, and then somehow I got picked to do something at school, and the scouts for Thames Valley were there at the school sports day, and they saw me run the 1500, and they immediately were like, please come to the club, we'll give you spikes, just come down. And so I started running, and by the end of that year I was representing the school. My 1500s were like good enough for London schools. I was competing. I'd won, I was in the Air Cadets. I'd broken all their records, and I realised there was a part of me that could do something. And having that physical prowess at that time in my life protected me, because then
confidence and everything.
I started to move into a world. And what I had been doing was, we were the kings and queens of the bricks. The kids that we all hung about with we were so tight, and we were all coming from these similar sorts of homes, and we all really took care of each other. You were never really alone on the estate, and your friends became the family unit that you needed. And that was great, but it meant I didn't have any sort of boundaries. So if I wanted to be out, I was out. Being at home was terrible, so I just didn't spend any time there, which meant I didn't do any schoolwork. And
it's terrible at this time because your dad's not there and your mum's
so unwell. And by this stage in my life as well, my mum had become so unwell and was terrified, agoraphobic, just about functioning, managing to hold on to us. And my dad had died by this stage. He'd had cancer when I was 15, and that was game over, So, and I'm left with this one parent that's just about hanging on to being able to parent. At which stage I've finished school. I leave with one GCSE, but I'm like a flagship for what is possible with sport, where I've won absolutely everything that I can. I'm doing 5Ks in under 20 minutes. I was winning local races, making money that way, but you never really got much. And then I went to college and I did a sports course, and I went to Canalside, which was a charity just up the road. And I was doing my an apprenticeship, I suppose it would be now, with Kensington Sports Development, but it was in a building that was run by the charity. And I walked across the corridor and said, how do I become a kayaking instructor? How do I do that down there that all those people are doing? And they said, just come and volunteer. At which point I was like, okay. And I did it, and I loved it. And immediately I was rewarded for my enthusiasm, and I was given kit, I was given training opportunities, I was given a job and qualifications.
I would just like to point out, if there's young people listening, that seems to be such a common narrative with people. You mentioned you're left with one GCSE. Our culture tells us you must educate and educate and educate, which, there's lots of arguments to say, yeah, that's great, but motivation sometimes trumps education. And by offering your enthusiasm, yeah, I will volunteer, I want to be in this environment, that is just recognised by the structure above you, and that energy that you bring, it opens doors.
It was an absolutely life-changing intervention, because what happened was I entered that place, which was a very safe place, and they were cultivating. It was like a family. This outdoor centre was extraordinary. It had been built for the residents of West London. It was the first purpose-built outdoor disabled accessible water sports centre in West London, in London, I think. And we were providing activities for anyone. Anyone could show up, anyone with any level of disability, anyone. And we would take kids that were quadriplegic on the water. There was no boundary, and it was combined sessions as well. So everyone went out together. So it was this crazy gaggle of energy, and it really was one of those situations where there was a talent hub that was being created. I didn't realise that until 20 years down the line, and kids from West London had become, these were kids that I saw every year for 5 years in the summer, had become vets, were on their way through legal school, were self-employed. And there was just something about that group of children and them all being together that sparked this type. These kids are doing extraordinary things
confident, yeah.
Now in their adult lives, and it makes me so proud to think that I was involved with them at that stage in their lives, where they were growing up in a place where there was regular stabbings, there was muggings, there was this huge economical gap between wealth and poverty, and that was there, and I trained there, and then. Like the deal was I could only work there if I went back to college and got maths and English. They were like, we'll employ you, but you have to go to do that. And I was like, okay. And along the way, I decided that I wanted to move to Sheffield and climb up there and get in the outdoors up there and do an outdoor education course. So I spent 2 years working with them permanently.
Did you do the maths and English?
Yeah, yes, I did. The maths I actually finished in Sheffield. I chinned that off, but I got my English and I got all the other things. So I was gradually accruing these qualifications. But at 17, I was earning money. I was able to support myself, and I'd saved about £3,000
at 17.
Yeah,
wow.
And
amazing.
So, and that was enough to get me up to Sheffield, pay for myself, and what was happening in that time for me?
Can I just ask you, where's this drive coming from, do you think? The rocky.
I think I was just so fortunate that there were people around me that were saying, you are capable of more.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, and it wasn't pressured home. It was just like, you can live, you can have fun, you can do this. And
is this coming from mum and dad?
No, by which time, this is what I was like, by the time I hit Canalside, I was in foster care. I'd been removed from... So
your dad's passed away, your mum's just struggling?
Yeah, completely.
And is she struggling? Is it mentally...
There was so many things going on. So there was my brother was in the house, and he was younger than me, but he was huge and he was really strong and he was quite violent. And so she was having to manage that. He wasn't wanting to go to school. So the big problem that was cultivated from that was she couldn't make him go to school, at which point social services were very much like, what is going on here? And then they approached me at college, and I was just just about to turn 16 and told the truth about everything, at which point they came, and they were like, I actually got put into foster care the day after my birthday. He was forcibly removed. So all this stuff is going on around me, and all I'm clinging on to is the fact that I can run. That was the thing that kind of, it protected me. And then there was this other really beautiful intervention, in that I'd gone to college to do a sports course, and there was this teacher, and I can't for the life of me remember her name. And for me to pass English, I needed to be interested in it. And she said to me, Amanda, how is your reading? And I was like, I struggle a bit. And I thought I was dyslexic, thought being the really important word here. And she gave me Nick Hornby's Fever Pitch, and I'd been playing loads of football. And so I was reading material I could relate to and understand the excitement in the games and that way of going to the matches and what all that all felt like. And that book cemented my interest in reading it because there was something relatable in it. And I think that's so important in education now, is that the stuff that you're introducing to your kids needs to inspire them in some way. It needs to be relatable.
Totally agree, yeah.
And that, all of a sudden, I was edging forward in my reading, English was improving, and that, again, I started to understand a bit more about myself. And it wasn't until much later, much further down the line, like 20 years, where when my brain relinquished its hold in terms of fear, and I started to access these higher states and better ways of being, I was able to do things like speed read. I learned to speed read, and then I read something like 14 books in a month. I was able to go into a heightened learning state where everything I learned I remembered and was
super
repeatable.
Immersed in it.
It was what happened was, instead of there being something that blocked stuff, I was accessing all these parts of my mind that were inhibited by a cycle of the fear system being so heightened and active. And once I learned that, I was like, oh God, this is repeatable. I'm absolutely not dyslexic. It's just something I've been telling myself, look what you can do. And there are times where, if you go on, like where I've got stuff published or there's videos, or there might be a grammar error, but the content is more important and the message than where a comma sits. And that's so important for other people to understand.
100%.
Yeah. So I'm at school. I'm now in foster care. This amazing charity has like taken me in and is trying to give me foundations that I can work from. And that happens. And I move up to Sheffield. And I'm this kid that has left school with one GCSE, is trying to make enough money to survive. I haven't got any A-levels. I'm doing this outdoor course. And then I decide I'm kayaking. That was the other thing that happened. Within these 3 years that I was down in London, I took up whitewater kayaking. And then I became like the London South East champion. I was on whitewater river. So I'd gone from estates into this very middle, like this kind of an area of sport that wouldn't normally be accessible to a kid like me. Mm-hmm. And I had this terrible little rickety boat. It cost me 50 quid. I was having to tape it together with duct tape. And I was winning races. I was beating people that were like in like £1,000 boats. And so I caught the attention of a few people, and I was going up through the divisions really rapidly, just flying up through them. And then I ended up with a bit of sponsorship. Someone bought me a boat. I had that boat for about 5 fucking minutes. Like, I
was going to say, what would it like going from your kind of
to an absolute
patchwork boat to a...
So in full Amanda spirit, it was like, I got my boat, first outing, I was like, the Thames is in flood, let's fucking go. And so me and some mates drive up. We're up at Shefton Weir, and it is it's fucking stonking. It's disgusting. And we're just like, woo, let's go, let's get in there. And like, we're good, we're all over it. But there's this guy called Dave who really isn't. And we're just like, who brought Dave? And so we're doing all these great crosses, and it's pounding, and it's like good for training. And Dave comes out of his boat, and it's just like, you've got to have each other's backs in situations like that. And it was in flood. Like, we'd gone up there knowing full well it was going to be pumping. Back where...
Is there any law?
No, you can get on. It's just like, it's your choice. But if you cock it up, like, be ready. Yeah. And Dave comes out of his boat. I'm 57 kilos wet through in my kayak. And there's this bigger man, and he's got his kayak, and they cost some money, and he just doesn't... I'm like paddling. Everything is happening so fast. Normally it would take so long to get to the pontoons. And it's just like, I'm like screaming, Dave, let go of your boat, I can't paddle. Like, and he's like, no. I'm just like, please, dude, like, throw me a bone. And I'm like, and he doesn't. And the next thing, there's just this like boom. And I'm like, I look and I'm right next to the pontoons. Like, this is death. Like, normally, like, there'd be like a good bit of breath, like, zone. I'm sitting there and I can hear my brand new boat, like the best thing I've ever been given in my life. It's crunching, like, and I'm in it, and I just know if I go under, it's bad juju because there's no breath, there's metal work, the water's going to press you up against stuff. What happens when you get pinned is you don't go up, you go down. So the current drives you further down and you just get crushed. Whoa. And, you know, this is a weir that is absolutely thumping out thousands of pounds worth of water. Jeez. And I'm sitting there like, fuck.
Making me sweat.
Dave.
Fucking Dave.
Dave jumps on my boat. Someone's on the pontoon, grabs him, he steps on my boat, and as he steps off, he kicks me into the water, right? So he flips me over, like, save yourself. Like, and over I go, and I'm upside down, and I can just hear myself being buffeted against this metal, like, boom, boom. And there was this moment, I used to wear like this racing deck, and I couldn't get it off.
Racing deck, give us a sort of...
So it's neoprene, it's got this really thick elastic, goes round the lip of so I'm locked into this kayak, this slalom kayak.
Yeah.
And the reason it was like that was because sometimes you just didn't want to kick it off because you get water in. But I never swam. I just didn't. So I was confident that I'd never need to take it off in an emergency. Except I'm upside down, it's Thames, and I'm like, my boat is crunching. And I'd named that boat, which was really weird, that I'd picked this name out. I flipped over and my deck was open. And I got out and this hand just shot in and underneath the pontoon and reached back for me. And it was one of my friends. And
It wasn't Dave?
It wasn't Dave. He's gone.
What did you name your boat, by the way?
It was called Gabriel.
Ugh.
Right? And this hand arrives and I grab it and I can just feel my friend like gripping me, like going, come on, man, come on. And he pulled me out and he was just like, not today. And he grabbed me out and he was like, well done, mate. And my boat has disappeared. I can hear it getting smashed to pieces underneath the pontoon.
I am sweating right now.
And there was this really mad thing about this because I could never have afforded that boat. And I could have been in that situation in my 50 quid taped together. And I would have been. And I would have still done the rescue. But the boat would not have given me the time. So the time in which I was upside down, my other boat would have collapsed. And this boat didn't only do that, my deck was already popped and off. And it was just like this synchronous moment where it was like I was given something that actually protected me more than I realised through the fact that the funding had come. The whole thing about that was nuts. I never knew where that money had come from, but someone was like, Amanda, someone's funded a boat for you. And it got smashed up. So we managed to fish it out. And we looked at the hull and I was like, first outing, but it was patchable. So I still kept that boat.
First outing?
Yeah.
This was the first outing.
The first time I've been out in that boat. I know. It's like taking out your like... it's just like...
Who are you not looking forward to telling about that? It's like,
God.
Boat. Mind you, I guess you're alive. So.
Yeah, so, and it didn't change. It was just that confidence of youth that you go out and you do that. That was what... Fearless, yeah. Like and you didn't need that to progress, but it was exciting when the water was pumping like that. And I've always had that streak of, that was something that's been in me since childhood in London, was like this adrenaline chasing junkie. And so that had come, and then I moved up to Sheffield, and weirdly, I had got into rowing. Sorry. And just punched the mic. Yeah, why not?
Full swing.
Boom! Like, and then I put down my kayak. I'd had a chance to go to England Development, but I'd started up this story in my head that I'd come into the sport too late, and I was never really going to progress
where you'd want to be in your mind.
And so, but what I'd actually done is fearfully talked myself out of development.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of the girls that were ahead of me were spending a lot of time in Europe, and they were following a much higher racing circuit, and I just couldn't work my head into how do I do that when I don't have a home? How do I stretch to being able to follow that life when I don't even have somebody to come back to? Like, I'm paying for all of this. So I move up to Sheffield and I take up rowing, and I'm living this life where I'm just turning 18. I'm cycling to college, which was a couple of miles across Sheffield, and I'm working nights at a nightclub and then getting up at 5 a.m. to make the outings. And so I would regularly be on the water asleep while people were warming up in the front of the boat, and I was doing that, and I did that. And so I was living this life where I was making and working nights at nightclubs. I loved, because I loved electric dance music, and it meant I could access it, and I wasn't having to pay for it.
Were you doing any partying? Were you intoxicated in any way?
There was a period of that, but I stopped it because I had aspirations to go further in my sport. So your
discipline, even in your circumstances, and where you're pulling this from, I don't know, but you've got this discipline ethic, haven't you? A work ethic that somehow is pulling you through.
It seemed to and I harboured this hope that I would get good enough to potentially progress in rowing, and I'm a lightweight, I'm fucking short, so I had to maintain a particular weight, and I'm not at all lightweight, so that it was a bit of a fight. And honestly, I openly can say rowing is the fucking hands down hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And people that maintain and do it for years, I have got so much respect for, because it is hard. And I loved it. And what I was doing every day, this is a kid that grew up on some of the roughest estates in West London, was just surrounded by concrete jungle. I spent as many days as I could on this reservoir in Sheffield, which was 2 kilometres long, rowing. And it was just so, even if I didn't get to where I might have liked to have gone, there was something really cathartic about that.
Calming and still.
And this, so there's this journey, and I'm living in Sheffield, and I start seeing this guy, and I'm there, and I spent 5 years there, and there's this moment where I had this argument with my maths teacher. I still didn't have maths, and I'm in this class, and this guy's teaching us about probability, and I just look at him, and I was like, you gamble a lot, don't you? It just came out of my mouth. And he just looked at me. He was like, get out. I was like, I'm pissed off my maths teacher so much. It's the one thing I needed to go to uni. And he's like, you can't come in anymore.
So where did that come from? What made you say that? Is that just an instinct that just overwhelmed you? Or?
He was so enthused about this probability stuff. It was the first time I'd seen him lit up in this maths class. And I just clocked it. I was just like, you've got a problem. You've got a problem. And it just poured out of my mouth. And
without sort of fast forwarding, your natural ability to use awareness, sensitivity, which is obviously a massive part of what you do now.
I had no
Is that the first kind of, are you sort of thinking, whoa, fucking hell.
I didn't really. I was totally oblivious to that back then. And now that's such a powerful instrument for me to, my EQ is absolutely, I'm gonna say it's through the roof in what I can observe in someone else, what they're doing with their language, what they're doing with their body language, how they're breathing, their moving profile.
How much of that is your instinct and intrinsic to you, and how much of it is education, reading, learning?
I think it's a combination, but I also think when you spent such a long time in a state of heightened observation, you have trained your mind in a particular way to take in details.
Just by design of...
So traumatic childhood, difficult parenting, growing up on an estate, moving to environments of fear, except I was absolutely in my element. Adrenaline made me feel alive. So what I can understand from that is that along the way I became dissociated, and that was my outlet of feeling. It's not the right one, but it was one. And I cultivated that further. And then, there's this history of me then going to war, boots on the ground in Afghanistan. And what does that then do to a person?
So when you leave Sheffield, you've done 5 years in Sheffield.
I did, yeah, and then I go into...
How old are you now?
I'm in my...
early 20s?
Yeah, I'm in my early 20s, and I got a sales job immediately out of uni. So what happened? I got chucked out of maths. I just went and got all the revision manuals and digested them and self-taught. And where I was struggling, I asked a few people, can you help me? And I passed that. I'd scraped a few A-levels. And then I begged Sheffield Hallam to let me in. I'd already been rowing for them for 2 years. It wasn't really a thing, but I was established in the university. My first year at uni, I was vice captain of the rowing club. Oh, wow. And a fresher in charge. It was like, everyone's like, what's going on here? But it's like, I've been here for 2 years already. I know what's going on. And it was development. It was still development. And then I went and did sports management at Sheffield Hallam. And I kind of, along the way in there, got fascinated by consumer behaviour and why people buy, why people behave a particular way. And it really helped me because this is the street kid in me, where I don't have money, but I've got to utilise some leverage to get what I want. And so I walk into J.E. James and...
That's a vital fucking skill, I think.
I'm doing this consumer behaviour thing, and I walk around the shop and I basically go, you're missing sales here, 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 and here. Let me write you something. And I go back into the shop and I was like, you need to, for guys, they don't really mind, but if women are coming in, they need to see everything tagged and priced. You want people to walk from here to here and go this way. You want to create a one-way route so people have to walk around and see. It takes people a bit more time, but they'll start to browse, slow them down at the front door, all this sort of stuff. And they were like, and I was like, and what they did in return for that, there was this bike frame that I couldn't afford. I couldn't have it, and they gave it to me for £600. And it was at that time, it was the Team Telecom giant TCR frame that had just been in the Tour de France, and they were just, and it was a small, they couldn't sell it. So there was this thing of it's an exchange.
It's a bit like when you were young and you were like, I'll volunteer, that energy, that commitment, that just motivation to achieve is being paid back in. And so
I end up with the bike of my dreams, and that it was a breakup bike. I'd come through this horrendous breakup, and that bike arrived in my life as I became homeless. But I know, fucking 5-year breakup, homeless. Then what had happened? I'd been with this guy for ages. I broke up. He bought a house.
What was the relationship like with the guy?
It was absolutely amazing to be with, and I cannot be anything but grateful for him to have had the courage to be like, we don't work. Because I, at that time, was so fucking loyal to the ideas of what it is instead of the relationship.
Yeah, committed to somebody.
Because that's an age thing. That's an understanding thing. That's a knowing yourself thing. And I wasn't in that place. And so for all the courage it took him to do that and the awfulness of it all.
So were you really upset, I guess?
A little bit,
heartbroken.
A little bit, yeah, turbo. And but also stability-wise, I've gone and I've become homeless again. So there were 2 times in my childhood where that happened. Boom, 3, homeless, 1 bag. And it wasn't his fault. It just is what it is. And then by that December, my mum had committed suicide. I know. So 2005 was just I had
How were you and your mum in that lead up? How did you manage to maintain a relationship? The bond sort of.
No, and this is the tragedy in all of this, is that I didn't understand mental health, and I was trying to cultivate a life for myself. And in my little head, I had said, once I make a success out of myself, I can go home with some money and start taking care of what's going on.
Total sense, yeah.
Except I'm sort of in that zone of being in my young 20s and trying to survive and do what I need to do, and I cannot bear or handle the story at home. So I stayed away. And so there's this kind of this painful tragedy for me in that we didn't talk for 5 years. And then,
At all?
No. And then the next phone call I get is from a relation.
And this is in the days before she can sort of voyeur through some kind of social media.
There's nothing.
Just blank, just
it was
void.
just like I was out in the universe somewhere. And so my mum had no idea where I was, what I was doing when she decided
And was she upset? Was she aware of the impact of the dynamic that she was struggling with herself on you, on your brother and stuff?
Honestly, I don't know. I can't say that I know. What I can, all I can ascertain from it is that she had reached a state of being so unwell. She'd been sectioned that it just really, it was a choice that she made, and like suicide and those behaviours, they're badly understood in society. We're afraid to talk about it. Mm-hmm. We don't know what to do when people start demonstrating behaviours, and it's still such a taboo. And the sooner people get on board with talking about anything that makes them uncomfortable, the sooner we have got a chance to get early intervention. And I'm talking like anything where there is fear, there is opportunity for things to be hidden. And it's just so much easier with life if people bring that out front. And it's hard because it takes courage.
It's like the acute pain to actually express it, and let's put it on the table, or the chronic thing we try and put under the rug that consumes us.
And it's so hard. And like this winter, this December there's been so many young men that I've heard about this December.
This, as we are now, 2019.
Lincoln has been, it's been high, like I'm hearing more. And I have to check in with myself. I'm like, am I hearing more because I'm somebody that has experienced this as a trauma and I'm more likely to be alert to it? And I would say this year I'm not. It's prevalent. It's prevalent in that somehow this is happening more regularly, and we're not able to access these individuals and provide them with the support that they need. Now, my mum's journey was decades, and that's so very different to a 19-year-old young man who has this, or a teenager, or even an under 10. It's unbearable, isn't it? It's unbearable, but it's happening. And there are so this is all going on in my life. And I've met this incredible divine light, which was my husband for a decade. And he is absolutely the divine masculine in my world. But we're not together anymore. And I couldn't wish for a better male sort of pillar for my children. And I'm so very lucky.
And you've got 2 children, right?
Yeah, Leo and Matilda. And so he's come into my world. And Pete, by all intents purposes, his name means rock.
So where we are, have you left Sheffield?
Nearly. So I disappear off and I go into the outdoor industry for a couple of years, and I work in North Wales. I work at the National Centre of Excellence, and I have an absolute blast over there. I spend some time down in Cornwall climbing and picking up qualifications and running the dart every day for the whole winter. And I live at a place called Chicks, which is inner city holidays for children's Chicks, Children's Holidays for Inner City Kids. Amazing organisation. Can't give them enough love. And I'm just ramping my outdoor prowess and having a really good life, because that was something that was just really grounding for me. But there's no money unless you go into power. So if you're involved in boating or power boating, then you can just, line your pockets. Mm-hmm. Except I didn't. I wanted to climb. I wanted to kayak. I was sailing. Kite surfing came in a bit later on. And then I just, there's this thing that's got into me, this belief that I need a grown-up job. And a lot of that, I think, came from the relationship I'd come out of, which was, a lot of it was, you're not doing something that's grown up. It's not going to get you a mortgage. It's not going to do this or that. And so I'm like, what can I do? And I kind of come up with 2. I'm either become a midwife yep. or someone. And so I'm going down this road of chasing midwifery. And Sheffield Hallam opens up a course. There's something like 15 places. They have 15 places for applicants. And I start going through the motions of trying to read all the literature.
So you're in full Amanda Gusto.
Yeah, mode.
Yeah.
And 1,500 applicants.
For 15
places, and I was second phone call.
Wow.
And so I'd go and I'd cultivated I really was, and they were like, you can come and train as a midwife. So it doesn't get much more grown up than that in my head. But there was this thing where I was like, if you're going to go and deliver babies, man, you got to be 100%. You can't be 98%. And there was just this niggle in me that it wasn't the right move. I don't know why, but that was there. And it was actually Pete said to me, you do realise you can be an operating department practitioner in the armed forces. I was like, what's that?
And Pete is your husband?
Yeah, my ex-husband, and the most incredible man.
And how do you meet Pete?
How did I meet Pete? I met... Oh, God. So... Peterborough Regatta, we'd done a really good job of winning. I was completely naked drunk at the 8 trailer with the entire crew, also men, not wearing any clothes. We were all about to go and do a naked 8, and there's this random guy there with no clothes on as well. I'm like, you're not in our crew, but I'm really drunk. We're never going to list this boat.
He's just seen you all and thought, fuck it.
He basically took all his clothes off and joined on. And so, at which point, that is how we met, like completely naked, nothing to hide.
Party time.
Yeah, but we became friends. We didn't actually do anything for 2 years. We were both with other people, and yeah, so like how we actually met was wearing absolutely no clothes. So you do what you do, and so he's already in the Air Force. He's air crew. He's on helicopters, and he tells me about this job. So I go down to the Avco, just walk in there, as you do, and ask them, and they like, it's closed. There's no job. And I'm like, I can't wait another year. I'm already 25. What am I going to do? Like, life is really hard. I'm working for the British Red Cross at this stage, and I'm not coping with it particularly well after everything that my mum's done. And there's no job. The lines are closed. So basically, they open up jobs in the armed forces and they recruit and fill. Excuse me. And so I'm like, right. And then I get on the internet and I'm like, who is in charge? And I start searching for where the military unit hospitals are, who's likely to be the senior person. And I find a phone number and I ring the person myself. I don't let the office do it. I call them and I say, I'm a graduate. I've been working for the British Red Cross. So I have everything you're looking for. Can you interview me? And they say, we're going to call the Avco. Can you be ready next week? And so what was closed by the government, I made a doorway.
Well, this is your gusto again, cue the Rocky, here we fucking go, you're making it happen, aren't you?
And so they reopened the line and I was interviewed and I got something called a board score 6, which is rarely given out for an interviewee. And then by April, I was going through basic training into a role which is called an operating department practitioner, which is to support operating theatres at the field hospitals. And so there was a 2-year training cycle with that. And then after that, I was, ready for deployment. And so that's what happened. It was just like, I was like, in the space of 6 months, I'd gone through all of that. And then I joined the armed forces and then said, let's go to war. Probably, retrospectively, not the best thing to do. However, being in the Air Force was the first time at that stage where I had stability. I had a great income. I was being trained to be I was being paid loads of money to become what I became. There was a group of us, so there was just like this sisterhood that I became part of, and some of my best friends, and we've all been through so much together, babies, marriages, now, endings of marriages, going to war, coming back, supporting one another, like this kind of like family bond. And we were all away from the things that we loved, but we were doing it together. So there was just there's this type of
deep
friendship that is just going to last life, so long. And we go back and come back together. And that was so vital for me, because it was the first time I really, outside of a sporting arena, I had it in abundance. And we worked at Peterborough District Hospital, some of us were at Birmingham, and then we were like put on these deployed roles. And so that's all going on. And then eventually, like, and I go to Afghanistan, and it's this.
How do you feel when you're making your way through the air to a war zone for the first time?
Oh, so fucking shit scared. Like, even though you're prepared, I was prepared. Like, even though I was prepared, I didn't know what to expect. And I've got my headphones on. I'm on the back of this big aeroplane, like
listening to Eye of the Tiger.
Well, do you know what? It was so funny. It was on my iPhone. Was on my. I didn't have an iPhone. I had my pods. Like, you remember iPods? Yeah. It was
original,
on. It was on shuffle, and like it just rolled into like this Rolling Stones like Vietnam song. I was like, no, like as the things like coming down.
Was it like Give Me Shelter?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, wow.
So like this thing's dropping, and like there's just like this. Oh,
that's a movie scene.
Disgusting heat just hits the back of the airplane, and it was just. And you walk off, and it's not quite like what you like. There's a holding area that you go into, and like you're there, and you've got all like you pick up, like you arrive and you're given your kit. It's given to you, and like we didn't have our weapons immediately, so we're literally processed through, and it's just really bright. There's just tents everywhere, and everyone's in uniform, and it's so fucking hot.
Close.
Yeah, and like like so hot, the hairs in your nose are like disintegrating. And I knew, because I'd be moving between the field hospital and my tent, I was never going to get used to it because it's air conditioned in the hospital. And it wasn't physically dangerous in Bastion for us at the time we were there. It got that way. But because we were front of house in ED and then in operating theatres, our exposure was just continuous. And it's not all bad, though. Like, I can say that from my point of view, is that I experienced, like, I was deployed with the leading trauma centre in the world at the time.
How much of your training was incorporating the pre-trauma ability to cope? How much of the training was based on, look, you're going to be exposed to things that are going to be...
They did this really... So they spent pretty much 2 years getting us ready. So they did loads of stuff around human factors like communication. We were starting to look at body language, followership, leadership. We had this amazing guy out on the ground called Mark Laurent who was observing all of us. And I immediately became really interested in what he was doing. He was from Cambridge, and he was an ethnographer. And so I had like a million, whenever I could, I was asking Mark about what he was doing, why he was doing it. And he was exploring teamwork in these environments, because it goes beyond. And you start to see like this collective machine working. And it's because the stakes are so high. Somebody comes in and they're in that hour of what you do is going to determine the outcome of whether they live or die. And so we got to a stage where we were working in, there'd be like 15 of us around a person, and we were working in near silence, but everyone was moving. Nobody bumped into each other. Everyone knew what to ask for, how to move, and nobody upset the person next to them when we were in flow. And that was most of the time. And there were occasions where what I've realised looking back is that even at the top level of hierarchy, coping strategies to what you were exposed to weren't always the best, but they were what the best the individual could come up with at the time. And so we were really heavily, like we did so many exercises. They built this huge area up in York where you would go, and they had mapped out the entire field hospital. So when you got on the ground, when you walked in, you knew if I turned left, I'd be in ED. Or if I walked down there about 50 metres, I'd be in the wards. So they were trying to create, like, to speed up our taking over from the team that were going home, because it would be an entire field hospital almost changed, like 250 personnel. Boom. like
Fucking hell,
in a week.
Literally a military operation.
Yeah,
literally.
and like quite, and there was this resilience hospital that was set back, so there was supplies that was all tented, and so there was so many things that we were being groomed essentially to be able to go and take over, and there were different things. Like I went with the Navy, which was amazing. I didn't deploy with the Army, which probably wouldn't have worked out so well for me because I'm a bit chopsy. So like the Navy are a bit more chilled out, and everyone knows that. So it was just this really mad time, and you did your best to take care of your friends. So my best friend was deployed before me, and I arrived. We hadn't seen each other for 3 months. And this is that thing about body language. I arrived and they'd moved into the resilience, so the moving out accommodation, and she'd made my bed and she'd gone round and everything that she had. So I had her pillow, I had her mattress, those things. Not everyone got those things. I had a place to put all my stuff. And she bought me a glow in the dark. She bought me Disney Wally glow in the dark bedding because she knew I'd be coming back in the dark and I'd need to be able to see my bed space. Amazing. Because, so my best friend set me up with all this stuff, and I didn't realise how important it was until she was gone, and I was looking around, and some of my poddies, my roommates, didn't have those things. And I looked at her in the face, I just went, how's it been? And she just gave me one look, and I just felt like this cold feeling run through me, like, oh God.
This is hell.
Fuck, is bad. And because we were so close, we'd always had that ability to kind of and it was like, okay, she needs to go now, she needs to get back to her family. And so there was a week, and it's a really funny time because you're there with your friends and you're really excited to see them, and you're doing all this new crazy stuff, and at the same time they've got to leave you and you've got to stay.
Yeah, they've been through that cycle.
Yeah, and they're ready to go home, and you're so ready to leave that place. And then it's Groundhog Day. Like the weather's the same, the food's the same, the casualties are different. And so, because it was the middle of the summer, like nothing really changes apart from the heat. And so all you do is, I was on like this 18-hour cycle of, you'd go in the morning until 12. You might get a couple hours off and then come back at 6. So you'd either get some sleep, come back at 6, work the evening. And if you'd either finish, if there was nothing coming in at whatever time, once everything was shut down, or you'd work until the work starts, which could be 8 o'clock the next morning when the next team came in. And then you'd go to sleep until 12, and it was just this. So we were cycling through, and then some days we were hit so hard, there was no...
And who are you treating?
Everyone. So children, locals, military. It was, at the time when I was there, it was everybody.
So was there a predominant...
Dominance. So we were taking military casualties, ISAF, we were taking, and insurgents as well. So we were eye to eye with very dangerous people.
Okay, yeah.
I looked at I was looking face to face in one of the most prolific bomb builders of that period. That person had.
And you're trying to keep him alive.
Yeah, and it's a conflict because you're in your head knowing you're a medic and that you've got to be like this, but then down the way, those people have died because of him, and it's just like it was difficult.
Yeah, absolutely,
and you have thoughts. Like I came away with so much. I didn't realise until years later when I went on like a psychedelic retreat how much hate I'd been harbouring for that whole experience, because it came up in its full, colourful way. And it was because I needed to understand within myself that I needed to let go of that distaste for what had been done to humanity and what I'd observed. And it was just this full abomination of life. And I found that so I would call myself like a super empath. Mm-hmm. And to have observed that.
Yeah,
and then
that's the epitome of the darkest elements of ourselves, isn't it?
It was, and the hard pieces that no one could get you ready for were the children, like at all. Nothing could prepare you for that. But at the same time, the kids out there are so fucking hard. Like, this kid came in, he'd had his ass blown off, like he was missing a chunk, and we didn't know. And so we're in the ED bit. I'm talking to this kid in Pashtun because I learnt a bit out there. And then he's come through the theatres, and we take the dressing down, and I just put it back on, and I just said, put him to sleep now. And the doc was like, why? And I said, it's not a scratch.
How old is he?
He must have been about 12. And he was sitting there chatting to me. Just, and I was like, they're tough out there because they have, like, it's not a good thing, but they have just a very different life. And this kid, I was like, how is he not feeling that? It was just... there was mad things that happened out there. Like, there was this day where, like, you were in this other world, and you were living in, I'm saying you weren't there. I was living in this, like, adrenaline bubble for months. And so when I did finally come home... You'd
been seeking that your whole time as well, in some way or another.
Yeah, but then you do it for...
that amount of time.
Yeah. There's
depletion to your system.
There was depletion, but it's a high. So imagine what happens to your life, even though you're in, like, this terrifying environment where you're kind of in it, it's heightened, everyone's in it, there's this... communal thing going on where there's and we're all working together, and you're experiencing what is the ultimate in teamwork, and it really was, like, throughout the hospital it was extraordinary what was going on, and it was international, and then you come home and you're totally on your own, and you've left your friends out there, and you know that other people, this is all going on, but you're just walking through your door and you're going to make a cup of tea. So you're angry. You get back. I was fiercely angry that it wasn't closed. And that I was leaving. I felt terrible that I was leaving the guys out there. And you come back and you've gone through all of this stuff, and you've been through these searing highs, and then nothing. And your purpose for living is just stopped. Where are you at?
That seems to be, and it's not, I mean, it's in no way am I comparing it in any way, but when you listen to rock stars, sports stars, that level of infused energy, and...
it's palpable. It was such an honour to be part of that. And I have seen that in the NHS. I have seen that in the UK when someone comes in with something catastrophic and the wheels just start to move to save this person. Mm-hmm. You see these heightened flow states, and my God, that is my jam. I absolutely love that stuff. So I'm always going to be... like, because of these things, because of the sport, because of the deployment, because of the teamwork, because of these things, like, what happens is if someone has been in massive trauma, they've created changes in their brain, don't for a second think they're not positive ones. Because there's this opportunity for this person to grow in such enormous ways, and that they can access these flow states easier than someone that hasn't been through these traumatic experiences. It's just no one's teaching them. And that's the beauty of understanding, like, the resilience in humans.
So as we move further towards where you are now as a hypnotherapist, obviously having the benefit now of listening to your story to this point.
Right.
How are you sort of harnessing it? How long do you stay in Afghanistan? How long do you stay in the military?
I kind of came home. I was unaware of, like, what I was containing. I wasn't happy in the armed forces anymore. I was very anxious. I couldn't get anything right at work. I felt like I was being observed. So there was this internal story that was building up of just not being able to get things right. And I was told I was underperforming at work. I didn't agree with that because there'd been, like, I'd got my report, and then I was like, well, hang on a minute. The day before, I pretty much stopped the surgeon from doing something absolutely heinous to a patient. I'm not underconfident. This isn't matching up. But I couldn't stand up for myself. And so there was this anxious profile.
You couldn't stand up for yourself due to your own energy levels or the structure of power?
To what was essentially everyone surviving in a system. Now, bear in mind, all my peers had also been, and all my hierarchy had also been deployed, and everyone was trying to work inside a system. And so reflecting now, I can see we were all trying to survive inside of what we were doing. And I wasn't doing well. And I just reached a point where I got this report and I left work and I was driving my car and it spun off the road. And what I hadn't realised was I was so angry. I was driving at about 90 miles an hour on a country road and I lost control of my Golf and it just spun and I was facing a tree. And I just thought...
Close call.
Fuck. And I picked up the phone. I didn't even know I was doing it. Someone else could have been hurt. And I just rang the med centre and said, look, I need to come in. I'm not right. And I immediately got triaged. And what I did, instead of going on SSRIs, which I was offered and that I was assessed, they realised I wasn't a danger to myself. And I said, can I just have 2 weeks off where I just do exercise? I need this. And they were like, sure. And that was enough to pave the way for me, but not recover, because I wasn't acknowledging that what was actually going on was PTSD. And at which point I leave, I have my kids, I come out, I just say, look, I'm done. I go, well, actually, I didn't do that. It's not true.
Were you and Pete together?
Yeah,
during this
so
time?
we're going back to back. We did about 9 tours between Iraq and Afghanistan.
Are you ever out there at the same time?
That tour, we actually were. So he's out on the helicopters on a daily basis, and I'm hearing in the hospital about them going down and casualties.
Fucking hell. So you're not only dealing with what's in front of your nose. You're thinking
exactly. Yeah. So there were days where his command ran up to the hospital and they were like, it's not us. It's just like,
Jesus Christ.
I know, it was it was mental. And then so we're doing all this, I come out, but before I come out, there's this moment that the Air Force gives me. And there had been this order that had come out and they were like, does anyone want to do duties at the Olympic Games? And I was like, oh, it's just going to be guards. Why would I want to do that? I won't get to watch any of it. And I applied for tickets. I don't get any. And I'm raging. I'm like, it's supposed to be sport for all. I hate the Olympics. Full fucking bastards. IOC, I hate you all. I'm so upset. Total paddy. And then Pete's like, Mans, look at write a letter. Look, they're asking for people. So on the last day, I sit there with my laptop and I write about how sport and the RAF has transformed my life. And I just send it. And I write about how I'd wanted to be Kelly Holmes and she inspired me to want to become a PTI. Although that's not what I did, that had been the dream. I wanted to become a PTI. And at Holton, someone walked up to me with my portfolio and said, why are you not going to PTI school? And I said, because it was an open, I applied as an ATP. And they were like, we'll make a phone call today. Do you want it? And what I knew was I would not get to the front line. So I said no. And so that childhood dream that I'd had, I kind of allowed it to move on. It was just, that was a point. It was a crossroads again. Which journey do you want? Mm-hmm. And so that was the right decision. And I'm there with this, I'm writing this letter and I just think I'm not going to get selected. Just send it. I get into a fuck ton of trouble at work because I do not put it through command and I just send it off for myself.
Right, yeah.
Amanda mode is just like what you do. I do that. I've realised now talking to you, I chase things myself.
You're headstrong and that's that.
And I knew none of my bosses would write the way I could. And so I send in this letter saying how sport has transformed my life. It saved me. Coming to the RAF has given me family and what it meant to me to be part of the Olympic Games. And I get a phone call, I get an email, and they're like, you've been selected for ceremonial duties. I was like, Brill, go to Portsmouth. So I tell my boss, and she's like, you're on standby. And I'm like, I'm always on standby. And I find a way around that, which was the Achilles injury I couldn't get out of. I was like, Mom, I actually can't wear boots. I can wear parade shoes. And she's like, and I get that verified by the med centre. And so now there is nothing in the way of me being in my number ones at the Olympic Games. I don't know what job I'm going to do. So I turn up, they train, and we're all put into these teams. And I still don't know. And it's 2 days before the Olympic Games open. And they go, right, they're going through everyone. And they point to one group and they're like, you've got shooting, you've got swimming, you've got cycling. And I'm just like, everything good's going, netball, hockey, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, what's left? And it was like archery. and something else. And I don't know what the something else is. And they say, someone's got archery. And then they go, that team over there, you're the Olympic Stadium. And they're pointing at me. And I'm like, pardon me, what? You're raising the flags for the whole of the Olympics in the Olympic Stadium.
Wow.
And so I'm
Which
like...
means you're right near, you're on the track.
We had backstage passes to the Olympics and the Paras, all access for 8 weeks. And I raised 62 flags, silver flag, that's me under the pole.
Oh, amazing.
And so
how cool.
And we just go down there and this absolute, like, when I was a kid, I'd wanted to go to the Olympics. I wanted to be an Olympian. That had been the dream. Like, sport had coursed through my blood the whole time. And at some point I let go of it. But I'd put the flag up to the universe. I'd said, I want to go to the Olympics. I wasn't specific. So what I ended up doing was being part of the Olympic, a part of the closing ceremonies, and in my role. And the only way I could have gone was if I had medals. So if I hadn't have deployed to Afghanistan, I wouldn't have had the medals. I couldn't have been there. That was one of the stipulations. And so I'm meeting Usain Bolt. I've got photographs. I'm hanging out. I met Mo Farah, and it was, that London.
Yeah,
and
historical London.
Yeah. We were just in the thick of it. I was bumping into. I mean, I'd name drop there, but everyone was in the stadium. So the first day, I see someone. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't even remember who it was now. It was one of the presenters. And I just thought that was it. I'd made it. I was like, I've seen someone famous, like, tick. Mm-hmm. And then, there was just this, and then it just snowballed because we were right backstage and we were opposite the green room. Anyone that came to get a medal, we were there. And so I was having, the time of my life down in London, and I watched everything. Pretty much except Super Saturday. I wasn't there for that day. The other team were. And that was fine. But I went and I saw, whenever I wasn't on duty for the medal ceremonies, I was watching whatever I could. And I was just soaking it up. And there was just these huge experiences, like hearing 80,000 people sing to Mo Farah. And I thought I'd peaked at that point. And then we went into the Paras and Channel 4 took over, and the energy was just like London had just dived into this thing. And I was watching everyone, athletes were doing the most extraordinary things, and things were going wrong. Like, people were falling over in the 400, and they'd get up and the stadium would just light up, and they would cheer. So the energy was profound. And I just felt this huge sense of pride about this country. And it was to have been in that. It did resonate
through, didn't it?
Yeah, but to have been in that, to be in the cauldron.
Yeah.
And I could just walk down and be on trackside and watch and look up at everybody and just think, wow, we did this.
There's a catharsism for you. You've just come out of representing your country in Afghanistan in a whole different energy field, seeing a darker side of our human existence, to then being in the Olympic Games, which, of course, is a unifying global event.
Yeah, and
in London.
Yeah, where I grew up.
And then feeling that energy kind of heal you to a degree.
It was extraordinary, but it was the time where I went, you leave now. You go home. It's not going to get any better than this, man.
Yeah.
You've done it. You can hang up your hat, and whatever's going on in you, which I wasn't acknowledging at that time, it's time. It's done. So I went home after the games and I reported to my chain of command, and I just said, I'd like to leave. And then my life took this incredible turn, because I always had decided, I knew that it would be the right time to start a family. And I had Leo, and he was actually born in the hospital where I worked at for 9 years. And the team, he was a complicated delivery, and the team that had delivered him had been my family for 9 years. So in that room were these people that had trained me, developed me, brought me on, and I couldn't trust more. And there they were, holding my hand through a traumatic C-section and arriving my son into the world. and getting us through it.
That's beautiful.
And I was so blessed for that experience. I was so lucky, even though it was a hard time. And then so I'd had Leo, and then we moved, and I followed Pete. And so this is all going on. And eventually I have Matilda, and the Achilles is starting to get really bad. And what I now understand with this is this was like an antenna for my emotional state. And so the worse it became and the less I could run. And what I kind of understand this to be now is that the perfusion in the Achilles tendon isn't great at the best of times. Now, someone that is in shock, or like the way that I see anxiety is slow onset of shock, because you start to see the same cascade of things happening in the human body. So my Achilles would get really grumbly when my CO2, O2 exchange would become bad, because my breathing had changed because I was anxious. I couldn't put that all together back then. And anyway, so it's getting bad. I'm starting, and my dreams stop. I'm living near Brides Norton. I can hear the military aircraft overnight. Pete's away on ops all the time. And I start to have these flashback dreams where my children start showing up behind the wire as well.
Whoa.
And
oh my gosh.
I really start to feel like I'm losing it. And I was like, oh no. And I'm doing PDTR at the same time. I'm kind of developing this thing. And then there's this thing, isn't it? 90% of all of physical problems are emotional. Enter Androca and cellular release therapy from America. And my friend Ian had been trying to get this course in the UK, and he was having trouble filling it. And I just said, I got fired from my first sales job because I was too good. They couldn't pay my bonuses, so they fired me. I said, Ian, what do you need? And he said, I need people on this course, or they're not coming. I was like, okay. I filled it, and I got me on it as well, because I wanted to do it. That was the motivation. It was me. So the 10 of us, I think it was, did CRT in the UK. Anne came over. This is her package, cellular release therapy. She's been working with people in trauma for like the last 40 years. She understands hypnotherapy. She started off at counselling rape victims. And so she's got this. So to go and do this and to train, you have to participate. I didn't know that I had anything. So I wrote this little list down of things that I wanted to deal with. Nothing up top. And within the first couple of sessions, things were starting to change. And then I got up one morning, and I'd never been able to meditate. So we're doing these sessions, and they're really like little ones to start with. And then I get up one morning, and everyone is like asleep. I make myself a coffee because we all live in the house together while we're training. And I lay on this wooden table, and the sunshine's amazing, the birds are amazing. And I just start doing this this breathing. And I just drop, and I felt myself fall. And all of a sudden, I'm doing one of the best whitewater races of my life. And I'm going through the sequence of feeling it in my mind and my body in totality, and the rush and the adrenaline, except I'm just laying on a table in the sunshine. I've never been able to meditate, and here I am re-experiencing that
full
run.
Visualization.
And I come up, and I look like I have snaffled a gram of Molly. I am pink,
big shout out
glowing, and I'm just like lit from head to toe. And I'm just like, what was that? Anyway, so there's something shifted. Then we go upstairs, and there's different ones. The big one for me. And so that's happened, but the enormous one, and that's actually after what I'm about to tell you about, the enormous one, I sit down and I write down my experience of my mum dying. And it's like 7 pages of like what, and it's because it was a very specific question, what happened next? So the very first thing was a phone call, right through 7 A4 pages of my experience. And then what they do is they clear on this. So you're hypnotized, and they ask you to release and clear this over and over again. And you use what are called idiomotor signals to answer. You don't speak, and you only use your fingers to say yes or no. Can you release and clear this? Yes, you raise a finger. No, you raise a different finger. And I just think I don't want to be in here for this. I know I've got to do it, but I don't want to experience it. And that day I'd been walking down the road and I'd seen this amazing red kite flying in the sky. And I looked at this bird and it just didn't want to. It knew I was there, but it just didn't want to acknowledge me. And I walked away. And I'm laying on this bed and someone's near me who's also training, and they're like, right, let's start. And they begin. And I just close my eyes and I just hear this enormous eagle call. Like, it screeched so loud. And I just felt myself pull out of my own body. And like the next thing, I'm experiencing this experience where I'm up, I'm soaring, and I'm seeing the world from a bird's eye view, and I'm just going around. And as I'm doing it, I'm collecting parts of myself with the assistance of this consciousness. And so I'm going from place to place, and I'm watching sunsets. And what I'm actually doing in the process was colour. I was going and picking up different bits of colour. And I felt like I was out in different places of the universe. It's all very like unexplainable in terms of feelings, but it was just like this very lucid, vivid dream where I'm with consciousness of birds. And then I'm stood on this balcony and I'm just watching like this massive show of like this one incredible energy just move around. And I'm observing it, and it was just... And then this next thing, I'm being told to wake up. And I've been out for 2 hours. I've answered something like 72 questions with no awareness.
Wow.
And except I wake up and I feel myself for the first time, and I'm covered in sweat. And I've been crying, and I've clearly been moving about, and I open my eyes and the room is the whitest white I have ever seen. And the temperature from the window, I can feel it. There's like this breeze on my arms. And I just think, I'm back. Where have I been? And I'm different. And I can feel. And then it was only in those moments I was like, I haven't been feeling. And something has left, something has gone, and I'm different.
Excuse me.
And that was something had shifted so hugely in those moments. And then I got up from that, and then there was just like this gentle cascade of all my senses came back to life in totality, and my zest for life returned, and my memory returned. But it didn't just return, it came back at full force, and I was then speed reading, absorbing books, learning at hyperspeed. And I decided in that moment that that's what I would do for the rest of my life. I would create adjuncts to subconscious learning that enable people to heal from the things that are hidden.
So you're married still at this point.
Yeah.
And obviously, as we sit here today, January 2020...
Not married.
You're not married today,
Yeah.
but the Breakthrough Project is your... I guess this is the inception in your mind without actually framing it.
It came back, and I just came home and I was like, we need to build an office. And so I just straight down, I didn't even know how to build an office. The next thing I've got like wood and drills and plasterboard and
you're creating an environment. Yeah,
build an office. And then I just start taking action on it, and like within a month my board is full of people that are wanting to experience what I've done, and I'm practicing with people. And then all of a sudden I'm starting to get these because I just went at it, it's like results, like people were just dropping problems, stuff, and I was getting better and better, but it wasn't enough. Like what happened was, I love Anne's work, it is extraordinary, but for me it was like all of a sudden I was like, am I capable of more? Can I do more? So
when you say you build the office and you start to work with people, have you done any formal training in hypnotherapy at that point, or is it a case of... Anne's
stuff was like 9 days of intense stuff. So she trained us in hypnotherapy at that stage in her
So you're being
package.
treated, as it were.
Yeah.
You're exercising your own energies.
And then I just was so wide open, at which point I just was like inhaling anything that anyone had written. So like I was like absorbing like anything Darren Brown. I was watching Darren Brown. I was like, what's he doing? Why is he doing that? How's he doing that? Why, it was just like, what is happening here? And just taking it to pieces to understand the process. And then just like what is going on with that human's body language, because I'd been doing it for so long already, it was instinctive. And then there was just this other piece of me that was able to just move straight through someone's shit and be like, I've got it, I know what it is, let's work on this. And it would be so far from what they walked in with, yet it would just collapse their whole problem and they'd walk out. And I've had people that have come in and they've been like, it's looked like depression. And then when you take it apart, something traumatic has happened to them 2 years before that they're completely unaware of, and there's been this slow regression. And then all of a sudden, it's that moment that's changed their lives, except they don't recognise themselves because it happened so slowly. And you deal with that, and they come back to life.
That's amazing.
And so that was what was kind of going on, but it wasn't enough for me because I was just so curious, and I was like, when you're working with trauma all the time, like it becomes like, it's not like, I really love young creatives. I love people that are creative, like, and people that are creative tend to have I don't want to suggest here, I see sometimes that people are creative have to feel trauma to evoke their creativity. That's not the case, and people need to learn ways around that. But there's sometimes like there's a model that's given to these artists, and so they can be people that have more stuff, but because their minds are capable of being more creative and they're more exploratory, I can have so much fun with them, and they heal quick. So, but they come forward. So I love working with that group. And
can I book my first session?
Sure, just come and have a play. But and then all of a sudden, like, people were ringing me up, and they were like, "Man, my teen is being thrown out of school. He's chucking chairs around the classroom. Will you do stuff?" I spoke to this kid for 6 weeks. He saved another kid from jumping off the bridge. Like, brilliance doesn't necessarily have to look like an A, B, or C.
100%.
So, like, and this is creating pieces in people that make them understand that they are worthy and that they have full of pure potential, and evoking that and coming back out.
Do you find at this time, with the social media climate and the kind of zooming in on the vanity of ourselves?
Let's do a whole other podcast, because it would just like it's enormous.
It's the climate of the time, isn't it?
It's a gift and a curse. So there's this ability to reach, and that's what I did. I realised that very quickly, and then that following December, I ran a show online. I went live every night for 30 minutes in December at 9:30 and ran a comedy show where there was huge amounts of interaction. And the idea behind it was, I knew how painful December could be because of my history and what some people have to face at those times when everyone else is being super joyful and super pumped. And like, I was, at that one point in my life, I was that elf, and then I wasn't. Because it was December that my mum did something. And so I had to overcome those anniversaries. And then I just thought, I can't be the only one that feels like that. And I had a tricky childhood. So whereas some people would be like raving about Christmas,
it's so polarizing.
Yeah, it's so big. And so I was like, what can you do? And so I went online every night on a Facebook page and just ran this show. And people,
when we put the show notes in, we can link back to this. People can see this. Yeah, people want to watch it.
And it's just me being an utter buffoon. Like, I'm complete, like, it's full man's mode. And Christmas is kind of like a funny time, especially if you've got kids. In that it is funny. It's like funny, ha ha, like, because you're losing your fucking mind.
Reindeers are fucking flying, for God's sake.
I know. It's like, let's get in there. Oh yeah, I know. Like, there's a whole story about Santa Claus being associated with psychedelic mushrooms. I love that. Yeah, side note.
We'll bring that in on another podcast.
So the long night went out. And it ran for 30 nights, and it was not scripted. It just was live, and it was like whoever turned up who just wanted a mate to chat with them and find out about their day. And it went crazy. And it really did good work. And I didn't know that until the day before New Year's Eve. And I'd set my thing, if this reaches one person and makes their Christmas easier, I've done my job. And I get this email in my inbox. It's in that weird inbox that Facebook doesn't always show you because I'm not friends with this person. And they said to me, Amanda, my husband committed suicide last year. I'm in my 20s. I did not know how I was going to get through this Christmas. And the ones I've watched, the ones that I couldn't watch them all. And I'm going into New Year with hope because of the long night. And I just broke down into tears because I knew, I was like, you did it. You did it. It didn't cost you any money. It just costed you time. You had to give something up. And then the reach on it was massive. And so, and it was just one good intention to combat loneliness.
And so simple.
Yeah.
So
and
simple.
so the internet has the potential to do so much good. But we have to get on board.
It's like we have to develop a whole educational system of how we learn to navigate and use the internet, it feels like to me. And so,
and the internet has to get on board, but it's got the potential to do so much good. But there is a part of the human mind that takes mirroring very seriously. So what it sees opposite it. And I don't know that often on screens, whether, because you're seeing yourself, that necessarily gets playtime. And there's so much pressure in the world right now. There's so, awe and curiosity are taking a backseat to anxiety and stress and performance. And adults need to play. They absolutely do. And so often we're lost inside of this wheel of activity. And we're demonstrating to the future generations what we expect. And so I just think there can be so much good done. And people just contact me. People find me on Facebook. They go to the Breakthrough Project and they're like, Amanda, I'm struggling with this or this. And I've had somebody, it's an amazing story, it's a girl called Ella, who was absolutely crippled with fibromyalgia. And she came in and she'd been on heavy medication. She couldn't leave her room. She was exhausted all the time. We did 6 sessions and she went back at the end of those 6 sessions to working as an international tour guide. Pain-free.
And that is such a common condition as well, isn't it, the fibro?
Yeah, so I'm not saying that every single person that's got fibro is going to have Ella's story, but sometimes you have to start looking around the edges of what is going on to see if you can evoke change. There's another incredible client I know who has a chronic pain condition. There's nothing she can do about the situation she finds herself in because at some point in her life she was given drugs and they have created a change in her body. That wasn't her choice. She trusted the medical system. It was unlucky. Now she has to manage her pain. She doesn't want to take morphine all the time. She doesn't want it. And she's a young girl. So what we did was I taught her how to self-anesthetize through hypnosis. She's already got the experience of being numb from taking morphine, which means her brain remembers it. So if you can evoke that feeling, because it's a feeling, you can get some downtime from your pain without having to up your morphine prescription. And it doesn't have that awful extra effect. So she's been able to come down on her dose. She's not off of it. That's not possible. But because she's using a subconscious modality. And that's pretty awesome.
And also taking some control.
Yes, precisely. So that's so powerful in these conditions because often people are just like, what can I do? And then there she is. She does it every day. So she's and we've started to play. So now that she's doing that and she's doing it so well, and she's got this natural ability at being able to do it, she just took to it. And I don't know if that is something to do with being in a place where you're in these conditions. Actually, I do. I absolutely do know that if you are someone that has spent a lot of time in heightened states and then you break that cycle, you've still got the machinery, but you can do it in an uncomfortable state. You can take yourself into a euphoric state. You've trained. You've just spent the years looking at something uncomfortable. So your brain has done the work. It's just how you're mobilising it. That's
connecting dots and.
So it's so exciting. But thank you for letting me come in.
As with the Breakthrough Project, that's essentially you being contacted by people who find you, I guess, generally by word of mouth, is it? You've got pages.
I do. So there's the breakthroughproject.life, and you can find a page there. The best place to track me down is on Facebook. Just type in the Breakthrough Project, and you'll see it. And you could ask questions. There's a group, if people really want to get in deep and want to learn how to lucid dream for better thought control, or want to experience past life regressions, or just looking, I'm always looking at different ways in which we can start learning about ourselves or create change. That's what I'm really interested in. Then there's a group. So it's called the Breakthrough Project Rising Strong. Just click it. It's on Facebook. Come and see. There's loads of videos up there. People can ask questions in there anytime they like. I'm always happy to try and explore stuff with people. Where I'm going with this is I don't believe it has to take a long time to change the way you are in terms of what you're experiencing, if you're willing to try something different. And so in essence, the state that I was locked in through PTSD got crushed in 2 hours. And then my life completely and utterly changed. Yeah. I was under hypnosis. I came up and my entire sensory nervous system was back and available to me.
Where do you stand with the idea that, relationships, the stress of relationships, circumstances, environments that people are in, contributing factors, when maybe they have that epiphany, is that something that happens as a byproduct, that maybe they start to move away from negative? It's
such an interesting conversation, because as soon as somebody becomes more self-aware, and what that means is that they're no longer internalized but externalized, they are going to, they're energetically, and so this sounds a bit weird, but they have changed. Their demeanour has changed. The way they move in the world has changed. Their tone in their voice has changed. Their confidence has changed. And it might just be for an hour. And what I do make people aware of this, because someone might enter an environment where they are behaving differently. So often there's an expectation for us to be a certain way when we go back home, let's say, or with your old school friends. You kind of adopt the personality that you may have had then, your place in that tribe. So there's external factors that can be going on. And often what I do is I make the people that work for me aware of that, because they will have the wider sight to notice the languaging or the way that someone's acting. And often that's because they've altered their way of being. And that puts that other person who may not be happy about that under a question mark about, are they willing to change?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's always a kind of payoff in relationships. And sometimes I'm literally coaching clients through that symbiosis so that they can maintain their way of being.
That's super interesting, and I am going to be sitting down with you.
I have the best job in the whole world. I get to work with people in a way that understands them as an individual and takes into context the things that they think have created such damage within them and turn it into pure potential.
Well, as I wanted to summarise as we come to the end of this wonderful, and thank you for your time as well. This has been amazing.
I love talking on a podcast, Sam. You're welcome.
Having listened to you describe, and I think I pointed out a couple of times during the podcast, you've got this motivational, driving energy that's accompanied by a certain level of discipline that you see things through and you're determined, and all of the doors that you opened for yourself, whether it started with a rocky sequence and you run around the block on an estate, to then, the trauma of your father passing, your mother slowly sort of regressing, and you going into a foster care system, but then you're always chasing this desire to achieve and fulfill yourself through adrenaline or whatever it may be. Each door opening. You know, that's a really important message for people. As you've said, having people around you say you can do things, and how it's led you to do this now, to put that back into people. I mean, it's a perfect position for you to be in. You harnessed a lifetime of whatever was driving you that you didn't understand. Now you understand, and you're able to implement it and help other people realise that we all have an ability in us to be more than what we framed ourselves as.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the important word, frame, because when you understand that it is a frame and that there's the opportunity for you to look at the world differently, you will experience the world differently. And sometimes that takes like deep embedding. Sometimes that takes a huge experience. Sometimes that just takes one tiny step in the right direction. And those beliefs just fall away. That's
amazing. This has been fabulous, wonderful, magical.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on. And
well, we're going to do it again, because I think, like you alluded to, the whole internet question, the climate, you know, your work.
There's so many adjuncts to this stuff. There's there's stuff that I'm really interested in now, which is like psychedelic retreats. There's that whole area I became really interested in when I was looking at PTSD research and how MDMA is coming to the forefront of like coming into this line of work. And I think anything that can create a safe, profound experience is going to be developmental. And so when I'm looking at change now, I'm expecting to go to the edges of what is available and create that environment. Like I've done that so that I can go back to my client base and say, I did this and I would fully recommend it. So there's so much stuff out there right now that we don't understand, and we don't understand about consciousness. We still don't know where that comes from, and just how the nervous system is working and what we can do. So it's a really exciting time for me to be where I am, and I'm always on the hunt for better ways for people to heal faster.
That's amazing. Well, I love the psychedelic angle as well, so I think we're going to be doing a series with you, Amanda, and we'll sort of go for the caveat off of this conversation. You know, we'll go into the social media, the psychedelics, and really explore it. Yeah. This has been amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanda. Peace.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Chew the Chat podcast.
Thank you for listening for Chew the Cat podcast.
Chew the cat.
I want to say my own words.
Go on then.
Very angry.
Well, how powerful is Amanda? That was a little bit longer than the first two episodes, but we were kind of in that spot where we had to keep pushing along with that, because that was some story, eh? So for Amanda to sort of come from what seems like when you move 30 times when you're a kid, especially in a big city like London, where it's just busy, and different faces, different places, everybody's alone with everybody in a weird way in London, I always find. And obviously her dad passing away of cancer suddenly when she was young, and her mum deteriorating. It's weird. I mean, we often joke, you hear the eye of the tiger, and everybody sort of has a bit of a joke about, fucking hell, let's do it. Come on, I've got the mojo. But that literally was a trigger for Amanda to, get out and run and do something, and that led one thing to another, and her tenacity, her drive, just led her from one sort of amazing endeavour to the other. And I think I pointed out during the conversation, but I'll say it again now, for young people listening, if there's young people listening, in this day and age where our wonderful evolution of creativity and technology has allowed us to be so comfortable, we sometimes forget that good old graft, looking somebody in the eye, putting the confidence in yourself to step up and do something, get involved with something, without expectation other than, to prove yourself a little bit. I think that's something I gleaned from this conversation. You open a door, you might find something in there. If there's nothing in there, you walk through it and open the next door. There's nothing to lose, really. So I found that to be a kind of reoccurring theme with Amanda. She's just got the confidence to just kick it out there and go for it. And as George Harrison famously once said, something will happen. Something always happens. So that was wonderful. I mean, it sounded fucking harrowing when she starts to go, recognise the PTSD, and the images of the kids behind the fences in Afghanistan, in war-torn Afghanistan with her own children's faces. I mean, that's some serious visions, things to deal with that must just be fucking difficult if that kind of thing's waking you up at night. But she did the right thing and took note and didn't try and bury it under the rug. I mean, even when she talked about the Afghan bomb builder guy who was prolific and probably responsible for a hell of a lot, and she's got that dichotomy of it's her job to keep this guy alive and to treat him and to be a human. And for me, when I look at war, I often think, when you get down into the micro situations, we're humans, aren't we? And you're brown and you're black and you're yellow and I'm white, but all we want is just to be loved and to give love. But somehow it all gets fucking tangled and messed up and out of control. But yeah, she's taken those experiences, all of them from that childhood, and from obviously being out there, and not just being out there and dealing with the things in front of her face, but her husband being out there, flying out on the chopper, and she can hear the chopper and she doesn't know, shit, one's gone down, is it my husband? I mean, it's crazy, and this is happening all the time, every day. We've got guys all over the world right now, people going through this. It's a difficult thing to imagine for yourself. But I love what Amanda's done, harnessing it with her project, the Breakthrough Project. She's really using all of that skill and that experience and that trauma to help other people, and she's doing a wonderful job. It's magical. I mean, for the Olympics to come around as it did, for her to actually be at the Olympics and to experience that in that way, and to get, in a weird way, like a closure, like a full circle closure of that journey in many ways, was just, I thought that was beautiful. And again, a testament to kind of just, she wrote the letter, she put it on the page, she licked the stamp, she sent it off. I think fucking writing a letter for us now just seems like fucking hiking up a 1,000-foot mountain. It's like, I don't know, we live in mad times. I said in the intro, these phones, they're our friends, they're amazing, they're glorious, but they're fucking dangerous as well. And I think, again, I will take that away, that putting it out there, getting in front of people, creating a situation for yourself, I think one thing leads to another, and people are yearning that more so than ever, whether they know it or not right now. I think we are yearning real things from one another. So listen, that was amazing. I will link Amanda in the show notes, in the description, the Breakthrough Project. You can find her. She's got multiple links. She's on all the usual places, as you can imagine, so you can find her obviously on Instagram. She's Amanda_Wanowski. She's in Facebook with the Breakthrough Project, and her website is thebreakthroughproject.life. So check her out, but all those will be noted in the description. So thank you very much to Amanda. That was episode 3. Okay. We'll say thank you to our sponsors, Go Deep Flotation. Wonderful. I mean, listening to that podcast, I mean, fucking get on the phone, speak to those wonderful people at Go Deep, and get in that pod for 60 minutes and tune out, put the phone down and tune into yourself, and let whatever our mundane trauma is, which is, life's busy, life's crazy. If you stop and think about it for long enough, there's always something. We've got to iron the school uniforms, we've got to tick the box, we've got to send the email, we've got to fill in the form, we've got to update the tax. There's always something, however mundane it seems, they all collate and become this never-ending conveyor belt of just fucking doing, humans doing, not humans being. So yeah, now is the time after listening to that podcast to go and just give yourself some love and lay in that tank and just MOT your physical body and your psychology and let it come back out and bleed it into your life. Those guys will look after you wonderfully over there. They're beautiful people that Go Deep, and you get 10% off if you use the code word CHEW. So do that. GoDeepFlotation.com. Okay, we are back on the schedule of every 2 weeks now. Threw me off a little bit because the first episode went down so well and we got such a great reaction, and it happened to be a two-parter that we threw the next part out in the following week. So we kind of gave you a bonus early doors into the Chat's podcasting career there, because this week was obviously a schedule because we're going to be every other week. I don't want to saturate it. I think we've got so much content everywhere. I just don't want to saturate anything. I want to keep it maybe something you look forward to because it's every other couple of weeks. Talking of flotation, we're going to bring in Kieran Rattigan, owner, founder of Go Deep Flotation. So you guys can meet Kieran. Obviously, you've heard me talk about him from a distance through these sponsors. So you're going to get to meet Kieran in person. You're going to get to hear his journey, how that got started for him, what got him into this life of recognizing that we need to take time with ourselves and just tune into ourselves and allow that and just chill out a little bit. So he's a wonderful person. You're going to love him. All sorts to come in that episode. His mum was an opera singer. He says he learned at a young age that sound could move objects. So it's a really fun episode. And yeah, again, Kieran's got some really interesting career curves and bends that come up. He worked on a tour with Kasabian and worked for one of the big music marketing companies in the UK. And yeah, he was in bands and made music, and he's a creative soul, and he's a lovely soul. And he's, with the flotation therapy that he's offering now, there's a really sweet ending to how he feels about that. And yeah, I think you're going to love that. I'm going to throw it in there now. 10% off, code word CHEW, godeep.com, search them out and get floating. So thanks ever so much, everybody. If you did enjoy this, like, subscribe, share, rate, review, comment, retweet, all of those things. They really do help us. The algorithm's a bugger of a thing for, beginning podcasts, small podcasts. But if you do take the time to subscribe, like, review, it really does help with that algorithm, gives the podcast some traction and allows it to reach more people like you, more people like me. We're all in a little club we're building here, and it's a wonderful thing. It's a magical thing. Like I said in the intro, to think that there's people sat right now. We've got listeners that are developing community-wise in America, in Australia. We've got a handful of listeners in Denmark, in Holland, in France. I mean, it's baffling. It really is. So to everybody who's listening, and the people who have reviewed and liked and commented, and people who just listened and told friends, because that's as powerful as anything. Just tell a friend, share it with somebody that you think will enjoy it, will take something from it. And we are sending nothing but love. This is amazing. It's exciting. Really enjoying it. I just want to, meet more interesting people and share these stories because we all benefit from it. So thank you very much, guys. We'll see you in 2 weeks. I was going to give an update on the Pod Bible situation, but I've been rambling on that long because I'm excited, and I'm going to leave your ears. So take care of one another. We'll talk about Pod Bible next time because there is some exciting stuff. But like I say, too much. Let's crack on. Enjoy your week, guys. Peace.